Well, good morning, everyone. We will call the special work session to order for October 5th, 2020. This is really a unusual, but I think a timely meeting for all of the council to sit and talk about their philosophy on a number of different issues and priorities that we all have. As I've said at a couple of the council meetings, normally we would be meeting with one another and having dinner before our council meetings and talking about non-city issues. I want to make sure everyone understands that, with our city attorney in the room, and we get to know one another. But since three of us were seated after the March election, that really hasn't occurred. And so I think we all agreed that it would be good for us to come together and talk about a myriad of subjects and also just get to know one another better. So this is a special work session that I would call more of a family discussion than anything for all of us. And it is a work session, so we will not be hearing from the public. But we put together an agenda of a lot of different topics. But before we do any of that, I thought it was appropriate that we do an icebreaker. And these are some things I don't even know about any of you. I know about these two, but I don't know about Councilmember Bunker and Councilmember Beckman. So I thought I wanted to add one other item. What do you miss most and will do first when COVID is over? Because I ran out of the house this morning and I forgot a mask. I got halfway down the street and I thought, gotta go back. And so we have a special drawer right now in the kitchen with masks. I cannot wait to get rid of that drawer. And the day will come. But with that, I'd still like to recognize everybody as we go through the conversation. So why don't we start with you, Councilmember Beckman, on some of the icebreakers. I'll read them real quick so everybody knows what they are. How long have you lived in Clearwater? And if not a native, where did you come from? A little bit about your family. Do you have any pets? Your top 2 hobbies. Where do you like to vacation? And what was the first concert you ever went to and where? That was kind of a funny one that I had at another event.
Yeah.
So, and then if you could tell us what you're going to do after COVID.
Sure. So, I'm just going to look at you all because we're here to, get to know each other better. So I've lived in Florida, in Clearwater for a little over 4 years. My husband and I bought a townhome on Sand Key 8 years ago and rented it out for 4 years, and then we moved down here in 2016 in July. And so that's how long I've been here. So it's our chosen home, and it's absolutely lovely. So my husband and I have, we were high school sweethearts. We've been together since we were 15 years old, went to the same college, and then married after college, and we have 3 children. So I have Josh, Sarah, and Michael. And Joshua is in Chicago, was supposed to get married this year, and it was delayed because of COVID. Sarah, our daughter, is in Des Moines, Iowa. And our youngest, Michael, is in Washington, D.C. And he, too, was supposed to get married this year, twice, 2 different, dates, and now it's 2021. Pets, we've had dogs when we were growing up, or when we were raising our kids, and when I was growing up. Labs, so bigger dogs. I know you have bigger dogs. Kind of lab mixes that we got from shelters that we loved a lot. 2 hobbies. I like to just be outside doing anything. Hiking is a big thing. Biking, walking, jogging. Our favorite vacation, I think Brian and I took a couple of years ago, or maybe, was to Zion National Park. And so we loved hiking there for about 4 or 5 days. And, I thought about the first concert, and I talked to Brian last night. I was like, what was our first concert? And I think it was Michael Jackson's Bad tour in Indianapolis. But I'll tell you, we saw Paul Simon in Tampa on his farewell tour, which was an amazing concert, and Stevie Wonder in Chicago, which was unforgettable as well. And what I would miss most is my family. I have not seen my parents since February, and my kids. The 2, Josh and Sarah, I haven't seen since Christmas. So it's that's the first thing I want to do is see the kids.
Thank you. Councilmember Bunker?
Well, I've been here 9 of the past 20 years. I moved here in 2000, lived here for a couple of years, from 2000 to the end of 2001. And having been chased out of town by Scientology at that point, I moved on. I was working for a decade in San Diego in 2 different TV stations, and then moved back here when that ended. So I've been back here since 2013 with the hope to be joining you up here. So I'm happy to be here. I do have a couple of cats that I adopted recently from the shelter, and they're terrific. I just felt, as many people did during this COVID-19 period, it'd be nice to have some fluffy animals about. And as far as hobbies, it goes along with what I've missed the most. I'm a movie buff. So I found myself checking my watch regularly to see, well, when do the matinees start? And for the longest time, there were no films to go to see. I have snuck into a couple recently, and I've been shocked that even on a Saturday or Sunday night prime time, there are only like 2 or 3 of us in the theater. So a lot of the theaters are shutting down again right now. But I look forward to them being back because I love disappearing into a great story. I also love to act. I did that for a long time. Although it has been close to 30 years now since I've really been on stage. Although I did a small role here at the Francis Wilson Playhouse a couple of years ago in Amadeus. They're doing a production of the Producers, Mel Brooks musical, coming up early next year. I'm hoping that they're able to stage it. I would love to be Max Bialystock. That's been a dream role of mine. And my first concert, I'm not a big music goer because I grew up in front of the TV when I was a kid back in the 60s. The TV was filled with movies from the 30s and 40s, so I grew up watching Abbott and Costello every week, and you'd see the Andrews Sisters, and Bob Hope and Bing Crosby were on the road somewhere. So my music taste turned to Bing Crosby and the Andrews Sisters. So I was a person out of time musically. The first concert I attended, I was working at back in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I think early in college, I was a stagehand when Alice Cooper came to town. So I got to watch that from the side of the stage, which was a unique experience. And then I did get to see, and once I moved to LA, I did get to see a lot of great classic artists. Mel Torme was at his peak at the time. I saw him a couple of times in concert. Cab Calloway, lots of great people at the Hollywood Bowl, and lots of wonderful classical music there too.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Well, I've lived here all my life. I was born in Morton Plant, and so I've experienced a lot of growth in Clearwater. And I'm going to tell you this a real quick story. When I was a kid, we lived in Harbor Oaks, and I'd ride my bike into downtown, and I was always amazed. And when I look back on it, I was amazed that I even had these thoughts as a kid, like, wow, we got a really neat city here. Because I'd see everybody that I knew downtown, and all the stores were full, and people walking around, and you know, I'd been to St. Pete, which is bigger, but I always figured that was the elephant graveyard, more or less. And then Tampa was always impressive because they had big buildings, but there was nobody down there. I just loved Clearwater. We had 3 movie theaters, and I could go on and on, talk an hour about what they had, but that kind of stuck in my head as I was growing up that I'd really like to see that again. So that's why I have the passion that I do on that. Clearwater was tiny back then, and I've seen the growth, the explosion in the 70s, you know, the expansionism that happened really all over the country, which caused our downtown, the merchants to flee and hit, you know, where everybody else was going. And so anyway, I think that we still have promise that we could have a very vibrant downtown. I love Clearwater. I have 3 kids. My oldest son lives in Atlanta now, and he has a daughter, and she just had a daughter. So I'm a great-grandfather with my oldest son, and then I had twins several years later. They're in their mid-30s, and they've both stayed here in Clearwater. We kind of told them that was a requirement growing up, you know, that you had to live here with us. And so we were real happy that happened, because now I have grandkids with both my kids, and enjoying that part of it. So my family was a very social family back then when we were growing up, and you know, kids were to be seen and not heard kind of thing. So whenever they would get together, we'd have to go up out of sight. But my dad was very civic oriented, and I kind of looked to him, and he impressed me with the level of service that he had. So that's why I kind of followed in his footsteps. Let's see, do you ever have pets? Oh yeah, we've had lots of dogs in our life. I did go through an experience with cats about 40 years ago, but it seems like dog was the preferred animal in our house, and we don't have any now. Our last dog was 17 and passed away about a year ago. So my wife and I, thinking that we would travel, we thought, well, maybe it's not a good time to get a dog. But I see all my neighbors and people that have these little puppies come over, and I'm like, oh, they're just so cute. I just want to get one. But I do have an aquarium. Now, I know they're not very cuddly, but I do have a 120-gallon salt aquarium that I love, because there's all kind of fish in there, and that gives me some bit of. I love to go home and watch them swim around, and you don't have to feed them every day. It's nice, you know. So if we go on a trip, I get my son to come over every few days and throw some food in the tank. My hobbies growing up in Clearwater have always centered around water. I've been a boater probably since I was a kid. My dad had a boat, and we skied, and growing up, we were always in the water, always in the water. I was on a swim team since I was 6. And then later in a master's, I'm a big distance swimmer. I love to swim. Also, I went through a period about 10 years ago, I did some triathlons, and that was fun. I do like boating. We were boaters, and I also love music. I'm a guitar player, so I like to do that. Vacation, I guess. Probably the best vacation I ever had was Colorado. My wife and I went out for 3 weeks in Colorado, and I've never taken a 3-week vacation, because it's always had to be like a week off, and we really enjoyed it. Scotland was another place that I really enjoyed. I'm going to go back there. All right, you're not going to know this, but my first concert, I look back, and I think my first concert was the Vanilla Fudge, and that was
Vanilla Ice.
No, Vanilla Fudge. Yeah, that was back in the probably 63, 64, and that was the only time I saw him, by the way. But that was probably my first concert.
Or anyone else, for that matter.
Well, see, I told you guys wouldn't know who they were.
I know.
But I was real lucky to live in Clearwater and grow up in Clearwater, because the 60s were a time of music in Clearwater. Clearwater probably had 30,000 people back then, and we had a thing called the Star Spectacular that we put on down by the water. And it was a monthly thing. It was actually, it was sponsored by the City of Clearwater Rec Department and WLCY Radio. and WLCA, well, that's before FM, it was AM radio, but they would play all the new songs, and we had probably every major act worldwide come through Little Clearwater back then. We did, of course, everybody knows Rolling Stone came in May of '65, but we had Beach Boys, I couldn't name them all, but that was very impressive, and that kind of really spurred my interest in music. What am I going to do when this COVID is over? I think I'm going to agree with Councilman Beckman. I'm going to go see my mother, who's in a senior facility, and I feel real bad about the older people that are there because they cannot see family through this whole thing, and it's sad. It's really sad. So I'm going to spend some more time with her, and I really can't wait to do that because she is probably not going to see too many more years, So I want her final years to be happy ones. So that's it.
Thank you. Council member?
Well, between the vice mayor and myself, there's we could take up the whole morning with the stories of old Clearwater. Because, as just like him, I'm a Morton Plant baby. Give you a little further back history. My grandmother on my father's side graduated from Clearwater High School in 1914. So we've been here a while. My mom and dad were high school sweethearts, and when everything east of Highland Avenue was the largest gladiola farm in the country, I found out, when I got older, I found out that my mom and dad got run out of there a few Friday and Saturday nights. Now, they never admitted to what they were doing, but I can figure that one out. Thank God, they can't say anything to me right now, but we'll see in future years. Like I said, been here. I'm a Georgia Tech graduate. Those are the only times I haven't lived in Clearwater were my college years while I went to Georgia Tech. And I lived in Atlanta for 4 years while both of my sons went to Georgia Tech. So we're probably the biggest Georgia Tech fans in Clearwater. But we've got, I have 2 sons, have 4 grandchildren. And, along the lines of what the vice mayor said, I just remember, the old Clearwater growing up. My grandparents on my father's side lived on Vine Avenue, which is 1 block east of Myrtle. And they were the second house in on the right. And I would spend the night with my grandparents there. And as a 10-year-old kid, I would walk into downtown Clearwater from there. And I'd walk into the local stores. They knew my parents. I could pick up a new baseball glove or a new baseball bat or a pair of pants, and they would just send a bill to my mom and dad. And my mom and dad would send them a check. That's old-time Clearwater. Don't know that we're ever going to get back to that level, but that was old-time Clearwater. And there's certain parts of that I really, really miss. My father bought the Palm Pavilion, as most people know, in 1964, and my brothers and I now own it, and we're having a great time with that. We're surviving the virus, but we're really looking forward to that being over. Pets, we're a dog family. I only have 1 right now. At one point we had 3, but now we have a 6-month-old cockapoo puppy that has a little more energy than a guy my age can appreciate sometimes. But she keeps my wife and I on our toes. Hobbies, I'm a golfer and a traveler. But as David, I grew up on the water skiing and doing things of that nature. But now at this age, I'm more of a golfer and a traveler. Where do I like to vacation? I've got my wife and I are very fortunate. We have a very close group of friends that love to travel together, and we do a lot of cruising. But we've also we did Italy and a Mediterranean cruise last year with a group of 24. But we love to do all that. But where do I like to vacation? Anywhere. I mean, I just like to see anywhere. I don't look to go to a beach. I can see that. I see that almost every day. But I enjoy the beach. But I also enjoy all the other things that Mother Nature has been able to create. So I like to go there. First concert I ever went to, Grand Funk Railroad at the Old Sombrero in Tampa. That, for those of you that don't know, that's the stadium before Raymond James. And I think, 15 at the time. So that was my first one. And what is the first thing I'm going to do after the pandemic's over? We're probably going to get our group of friends together and go on a cruise. I won't be surprised at all if that's what we end up doing. So.
Good deal. Well, I've lived in Clearwater since 1979. I'm the youngest of 6, and a mistake. My parents had 5 kids in 10 years, then an 8-year gap, and here I am. So we lived in Chicago prior, and they decided they wanted to escape winters. My father had retired, and we moved down to Clearwater Beach. And 3 years later, they decided they missed Chicago, so we moved back for 2 years. They remembered why they left Chicago, and we moved back to Clearwater, which was the winters and snow. So I went to Clearwater High, graduated from Countryside, and then 2 years up in Chicago, really about a year and a half, because they took me out in the middle of school years. It was a blast. I have 2 kids, a daughter and a son. They both live locally. My son has 3 children, so I am a grandparent. We just had a new one 2 months ago. So it's exciting, and I don't have the energy to keep up with them when they come and stay the weekend, but we try. I'm a huge dog person. We had 4 until a week and a half ago. We lost
huge dogs.
Yes, we lost Daisy, unfortunately, the night I went and visited the dog park. So we still have a Great Dane and 2 golden retrievers. At one point, we did have 6, which proves we are rednecks. We had more dogs than people, and still do for that matter. I love to golf. That's my number one. But I also really love being out in the yard doing things. Because at least you see what you did at the end of the time, and you can just kind of focus and be alone. And so I do like doing yard work. We love to go to Carmel, California. We like traveling all over, but that's kind of our place. It's always cool, so it's nice to escape to in September when we're finally so sick of the summer here. And there's great places to hike, great restaurants, galleries, incredible golf, arguably the best in the world. What am I going to do when COVID's over? Well, fortunately, we have our whole family here. I lost my parents in the early 90s to cancer, but my in-laws just moved here a year ago to be close to us, and then we can't see them hardly at all because we don't want to put them in harm's way. But they're a mile away, and we drop off meals. Occasionally, we will have them over, and we extend our table, and they sit at one end, we sit at the other. They walk in the back door, serve their food, and sit down, and then they go out the front door, and that's it. So it's a little bizarre, but I'm looking forward to entertaining again and having friends over and not worrying about it. My first concert was at Ravinia Park in Highland Park, and it was Cheap Trick. I was 11, and it's ironic because Mr. Zander retired here in the Clearwater area. He was the lead singer for Cheap Trick, so that was my first concert, a great venue up there. So, well, that's good. It's interesting to hear some of that information about everybody. I appreciate you sharing. Now we can really dive into it. So, Mr. Horn, Miss Aiken, do you have anything to add before we start actually going through the list?
No?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. So we thought one of the good things to ask is, what do you believe Clearwater's identity is? And what do you think it should become? Because often perception versus reality is different. I mean, I know that I like our slogan, beautiful from bay to beach, but at the same time, we aren't completely there yet. So it's aspirational. Anyone want to start off? Vice Mayor, dive in. The water's fine.
I've always, as I said before, thought Clearwater was a beautiful city. It's grown a lot since I've been here. I think it's made some right decisions on the growth. What I like, the moniker of best city to live, work, and play, I think fits it really good because that's what we do here. I mean, our residents live here, most of them work here, and it's a great place to play. That's our biggest economy is play. We have some of the best parks, than any other city around us. I guess the thing that really stands out to me is Clearwater's communities, different neighborhoods. I don't know the exact count, but I looked this morning, we have 50, it says we have 51 communities, but some of them are counting condominium associations. I think we're around mid-30s on neighborhoods. But what's amazing is they all have a different flavor. I mean, they really do. You could go to countryside, it's different than Morningside, it's different than the beach. I always like that, and I think that that's something we can work on, the strengths of making neighborhoods more diverse and keep their color, their color in their neighborhood. We've got great schools. We got a good urban-suburban mix. So I think, when you think of Clearwater, I think of home, but I think Clearwater is I think we could do more with a balance of commercial versus residential, but I understand why residential so much because we're built out. And we're getting more apartments all the time. If you look at 19, a lot of those car lots that were there are being built out, by apartments. More people here. We're getting more dense, which some people probably don't like. But, I look at it as a good thing. I mean, I hear people sometimes say, gee, I don't go to the beach anymore. I go, why? And they go, well, the traffic's too bad, to go to the beach. Well, I live on the beach. If you go to the beach before 11 o'clock, you won't see hardly any traffic. Get there early, you can enjoy the day at the beach and come back. But to say that it's a failure because we have too much traffic, it's like, double-edged sword. Well, we got too much traffic because a lot of people love the beach. So anyway, that's kind of my take on it. I think we can make it better maybe by, trying to be a little more diverse on the layout of what Clearwater is, but I think we've made some good decisions to now, and I would strengthen the neighborhoods, what they think, their feel, and what they want to keep as their personality, I think is very important.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Well, I think it's the question of what do you believe is Clearwater's identity is, and what would you like it to be? I think it's a two-pronged question because Clearwater's identity nationwide and internationally is as a great beach destination, which has created our #1 industry of tourism. And I don't think once you attain that kind of reputation, I don't think you ever want to lose that. And I think it's something you have to keep in mind, which leads to the philosophy and the old saying that, if you're not progressing, if you're just standing still and not progressing, you're falling behind. And that applies very, very significantly to Clearwater and what we're doing. And then from a resident standpoint, I think Clearwater is viewed by most residents, and one of the reasons everybody likes to live here is we're a very clean, very safe city with, the benchmarks that you look for when you're looking to live somewhere. We've got great hospitals. We've got good neighborhoods. We've got the library system. The services that the city provides are all good. Education is an argument you can have as to whether or not we have great education for our kids or not, but I think it's definitely improving. But we are, you have a lot of people, every time there's a Facebook page of old Clearwater, you lived in old Clearwater, and one of the comments that are most prevalent at all times, oh, I loved it like that back then. Well, the problem is, if Clearwater would have stayed like that forever, you couldn't afford to live here right now. You could not afford to live here right now if it was still little old quiet town Clearwater, because to provide all the services and everything else for what you need, and to maintain, to have had, what you had back then, the property taxes and the expense of it would eat you up. So there's a give and take there, and I think we're doing a pretty good job on both ends, both as the beach destination and our reputation nationally and internationally, and I think we're for the most part, there are individual neighborhoods and some individuals who will disagree, but I think the vast majority of people who live in Clearwater are very happy with what they're to be here. So,
Councilmember Bunker.
Well, I think for most people, now the first time I became familiar with Clearwater was back in 1980, when 60 Minutes came to town and did a story about Scientology trying to take over the city. And for a lot of people around the world, when they think of Clearwater, they think of beautiful beach, and they think of Scientology dominating the city, which it doesn't necessarily do, but that's the impression that people have. And that's why I moved here, because I cared about the city long before I first came here in 1999. I would like to see us known as having a world-class beach and standing up to Scientology. But we'll talk about that much later. But I think that's a reality for a lot of people, that instantly they'll think of the Scientology organization.
Okay. Councilmember Beckman.
I kind of looked at this question as, how do we see Clearwater and its identity as we have residents who live here, and then we have a national audience, and then we have how we're seen locally, like in the county or in the state. And I think, I'd start with the national audience only because when we purchased our townhome 8 years ago, I didn't even know Scientology existed, really. I mean, maybe heard it once or twice, but I didn't have any big idea that there was a huge national presence of Scientology in Clearwater. And it didn't affect our purchasing decision. Generally, it was the location. It was the weather, being close to the beach, and we came and visited, and the community was very welcoming. And so we have this national reputation as this award-winning beach, and I think it's a great destination. When I walk along the beach, especially in the past, in the summer, spring and summer, you hear a lot of foreign languages, and lots of people from all over the world visit. And so I think it's important to maintain that reputation as a real welcoming, clean beach for national and international visitors. And then we have residents, and I think I agree with David, Vice Mayor Albritton, that we have a lot of personalities in those different neighborhoods. There's certainly a different feel in Countryside. I was out there this weekend. I went from a North Greenwood event to Countryside, and, you know, the atmosphere is like night and day. And I think each community, Skycrest, Lake Bellevue, the beach, North Beach, we should celebrate those different identities or the personality that's there in those communities. I had a phone call last week with, there's a arts, you know, I don't know exactly what it is, but we've hired on this arts promotion, and with Mr. Hubbard, who's part of our, what's his title? I'm sorry. But anyway, she and I talked, and she, you know, she wanted some of my feedback about arts throughout the community, and I said exactly the same thing, that we have a lot of different personalities in our neighborhoods, and I think that that'd be a great place to put art and celebrate the uniqueness there. But there's also great disparity between those neighborhoods and how they look, the roads, the sidewalks, the parks in those different areas. There is definitely a different feel, and I think that we can improve on a little more equity throughout the city. And then our reputation locally, I don't know that we're seen as innovative or leaders, and I think it's important that we should be. I mean, I've heard this phrase, we're the crown jewel of the county, our city, our location. And I certainly want to protect that and protect our greatest resource, which is the beach and our environment here. But I think we could be seen as more leaders. And I think, you know, what happened last week with us taking a pause on the library or getting things straight about us spending big money on big projects, you know, we need to be seen as doing due diligence, making thoughtful decisions, sticking with them, all that stuff. So I think that can be worked on a little bit. I mean, you know, again, most of my knowledge base comes from all that door knocking. I wasn't born in Morton Plant Hospital, and I didn't grow up and hear people's stories for 40 or 50 years. And so my exposure is certainly much more limited than yours. But as a outsider who's not really, you know, I don't have any preconceived ideas or notions, I have listened to all, you know, this variety of residents and take in, and I think I can, you know, I bring a little bit more objectivity, maybe, you know, just not as emotional component, because I don't have it by not growing up here.
Great. I look at the city right now, and I think most people look at us as Clearwater Beach. That I think is the identity. I think some of our citizens even think that there is too much emphasis on Clearwater Beach. One of the reasons I want a meeting like this is so we can talk about some of the issues, because, you know, we have a lot of revenue that comes from the beach and the waterfront properties that actually helps pay for a lot of the other things throughout the city. And I don't think people understand where tax revenues come from, and that they don't solely stay, for instance, on the beach. In fact, it subsidizes a lot of the other things that are off the beach. People need to know that. When I talk to them one-on-one, I will often correct them on that misnomer, because it is an issue. And that's the way it's been forever. I mean, I think we have aspirations, and my aspiration is to be bright and beautiful, but we need to work on actually fulfilling that promise. I don't think we always do. One of the questions that's in here, and I hope we get to it, is, you know, how much is enough of anything? I think we need to set some levels of how much do we want to spend on each individual service, be it libraries, parks of recreation, how many fire stations. I think a lot of the things we have in this city, we're kind of where we need to be with a population that is relatively static. We are not growing by leaps and bounds. We are getting a little bit more density, as the vice mayor said, in some of these multifamily residential out on 19 and some of the surrounding area. I was talking to, somebody recently, and they were talking about the fact that our Parks and Rec fee for non-residents was a burden. Well, it's interesting. So we built all of these facilities, and I think we are the clearinghouse for North Pinellas County for Parks and Recreation. We have more than what we need in Parks and Rec for our residents, but because of team sports and other things, we've kind of become the clearinghouse for that. And our citizens have paid for that. And the reason we have a higher rec fee is because those citizens from surrounding towns are using our facilities, and they need to take part in that. One of the things I want for Clearwater, it goes back to one of the things the vice mayor said, I want to be a town where a child could be born at Morton Plant or Nice Countryside, get a good education, and stay here because they have a good job that they can raise a family on. And that's something that I think we need to work towards, because I don't think we're completely there yet. A lot of kids go to University of Florida, Florida State, UCF, USF, and when they graduate, they move away. It's not only a problem for Clearwater, it's a problem for Tampa Bay. We need to have better jobs where our kids can stay here, and that will support our overall economy. So I just think that's critically important. So this is a biggie because I think we've had a lot of conversations, and the next question is, what is the role of city government versus county, state, federal government, the private sector, including not-for-profits? We work with our not-for-profits in the city to give services that we're not really equipped to give. And I'm actually going to go first on this one. I don't normally go first on anything, but if you could pass these down. I know you're fairly familiar, but I think it bears repeating some of this. What I've given is for those who want to follow on at home, is just a graph of how your property tax bill breaks down. So if you got your property tax bill last year, 31% of that would be going to the school board, 31% would be going to the county, 29% to the city, and 9% to other agencies. Those other agencies are JWB, which is Juvenile Welfare Board, SwiftMud, PSTA, which is Pinellas Transit Authority. And so you can see that of the three big entities, we get a little bit less than the county and less than the school board. And so with that money, I believe we are supposed to be providing municipal services. And what do those include? Police, fire, Parks and Rec, libraries, public works, and then we have enterprise funds, which are solid waste, recycling, gas, water, sewer. Those are paid for just like you would pay for any utility. But the five main ones really are police, fire, Parks and Rec, libraries, and public works. And so the question is, do we really want to deviate from our core business? I mean, we're never going to get into national defense, right? That's the federal government's role, to form treaties. That's their role. At the state level, they do certain things that we don't do, and so same with the county. And so I'd like to talk about that. I would like to go back. One thing I didn't include, Councilmember Beckman, is I think Clearwater has been a leader on a lot of things. St. Petersburg, for instance, just got recycling a few years ago. We've been doing it for over 20 years. We were the first city to get LED lights and go through Duke and put those throughout the city. We've been the leader in Parks and Rec in this county forever. We've got the best library system in the county, and that's been in existence forever. I mean, for how many years have we had 5+ libraries? So I think we are the leader on many areas, without question, as a matter of fact. It's a question of whether you want to be a leader in other areas. So let me just go through the subcategories. Are there times we want to deviate from our role? Now, I think we did deviate as a council up here. Well, I don't think we did. I know we did. With our business grant program. That was outside of our lane. I think we did that because COVID was a very unusual circumstance. At least I hope it's unusual. But we used money specifically to help businesses. Now, that was really the role of county government because they got the CARES Act money to do that with from the federal government. We did not. There are not many times that I want to deviate from our role. I think we have our lane, and I pretty much want to stay in it. The trigger for me on this was an unprecedented pandemic. And then the last question is, what would be the trigger was the second question, but are social services a fundamental municipal service? Do we desire to be a social services provider? If so, which ones? Do we want to be a more significant funder? If so, what would we divert money from to pay for these services? Now, that 31% that goes to the county, they are the level of government that does a lot of social services and health. And so for me, we help with some social services through, for instance, HEP. So we help with homelessness. That is not something we're doing directly because I don't think we believe we would do it as well as they do it. I mean, they're nationally recognized as, pulling people out of the cycle of homelessness better than almost anybody around. So philosophically, I just want everyone to know it's going to be very unusual for me to want to go outside our lane. A, because I don't think we're necessarily going to be as good at it as some other agencies, and B, because we don't have the money to do so. So, someone else want to take a crack at number 3, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, when I ran for this office, the number one thing that citizens are concerned with is their safety. And that's why one of the biggest things in our budget is fire and police. That's important. I think we do have a great police department and fire department. Second thing is infrastructure. Since being on council, I've been able to be more familiar with how we deal with clean water. I mean, it's amazing. Most people don't know what kind of process it is to guarantee clean water to our, people. And of course, sewer services, roads, curbs, sidewalks, a lot of things we have to do for liability reasons, sidewalks. I mean, everybody loves trees, but they cause sidewalks to buckle, people trip, and it becomes a hazard. So we have a program to go around doing that. But I kind of agree. Social services, we do, I've seen we do a lot of that with our housing program. I mean, we do. Chuck does a great job with linking people with housing and what we're doing with Prospect Towers now to try to help those people out and getting other people involved. But it really, I think, social services, with the help of the city, maybe not financially, but we can get, nonprofits, which are a big thing for helping people. And I've seen that we do that. Now, we could link them with the county programs and get more involvement there, but I've looked at some other cities and what they do, and the main thing that I kind of agree with the mayor that we got our hands full with just keeping everything kind of up with the infrastructure and the safety part of it. Street lights, I mean, it's a list is huge what has to be looked at and maintained and upgraded. And then with the beach, we've got some other, things too. We got water to worry about. We've got the sea turtles and the lighting there, and I mean, it goes on and on. But we try to do the best we can to solve a lot of those issues. So I kind of agree that infrastructure, police safety comes first, and infrastructure comes second, and then whatever we can do after that, we'll try to help with it.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, I kind of made an analogy about this one, that, our social services fundamental, do we desire to be the social service provider and all that. I look at us as a city government as being closest to the residents. We interact with them every day. They're sending us email, they're calling us, we're out in the community. So we're like the classroom teachers. And then we've got the county that might be like the principal, that looks at different cities within the county. And then you've got, the superintendent or whatever, the school district that is a state level. And so we're the ones who know what our residents are experiencing, what their challenges are, what we need. And we need to be the voice of our residents. And the fact is that the state does not give us enough money for social services to deal with all of the challenges here. And so we get state funds, and Chuck Lane and Denise do their best with those limited funds. That's never exactly, what they need, and distribute it, but it's not enough to serve the people who live in our community, whether they're living in a home or they're not living in a home. And so just to say, well, sorry, that's how it goes. We've distributed our funds, and we have people on 3-year waiting list for affordable or subsidized housing. That's unacceptable. And so for me, I feel like we need to work to improve the lives of the people who reside within our city. And we do have limited funds, and I'm not asking us to take on a role of a social service provider, but like I kind of brought up at last Thursday's meeting, we certainly can partner with these nonprofits that are doing the heavy lift. We can cut red tape, we can support them. To me, people have mentioned schools as a teacher, and more importantly, the research tells us it is a fact that if we put money into childhood education, early childhood education, and get kids at reading level at 3rd grade, the statistics tell us they will have a greater chance of being successful. And so I think our public schools are fine here. They're not the best in the nation, that's for sure. And we can do, as a city, we can do some things to help enhance that, whether it's, and post-COVID or eventually after this election, where my attention has been, it'd be great to develop some kind of a volunteer coordinated effort to match a bunch of our retired people with young readers to help bring them up to reading level. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities as a city we can engage in. I look forward to leading to help make improvements with residents on their everyday life. And I would say too, it's true, you've got your chart here and where the money goes, and that our primary function is those 5 different areas, Parks and Rec and Fire and Police and the Municipal Services, Utilities. But in light of that, then we say, well, is it our responsibility to build a $64 million plus entertainment venue that's going to be a national draw? I mean, that is a choice that we've decided to pour a ton of money there, to help our economy, to, keep things new and fresh and current and keep people coming, or whatever reason that's been promoted. But that's a choice. That doesn't fall into one of those 5 categories, right? And that's a ton of money that goes there. And so, I question that. the state is not adequately funding social service programs. And that just is a reality. And so it's, do we turn a blind eye and say, sorry, we don't have any money? Or do we say, wow, I need to try to help improve this in some way? And I'm not a Pollyanna who thinks that I'm going to clear everybody up off the street, because I know that there is a percentage of homeless population, for whatever reason, mental health or whatever, who we are not going to eradicate all homelessness. We're not, whether it's the nature of their mental illness, they don't choose to medicate or whatever. But, you know, the professionals that I've been speaking to recently in our community that head up those social services say that, you know, out of our, I thought I saw Sergeant Fidelis, like out of our 70 to 80, you know, kind of chronic homeless, that there are about 20% or so, you know, that we can get off the street, that we will be able to get through a STARS program, give them skills, get them a job. They'll be able to follow the rules and stay within the boundaries to get at home and be a productive tax-paying citizen. So, you know, let's set some realistic goals. So, you know, that's how I look at it. You know, I grew up in a family where my dad had a degree in social work. He worked in the state government of Michigan. He was a lobbyist for the governor, and then he was director of the Department of Labor. So we looked at, you know, we advocating and having family conversations always about workers. And then he was chairman of the Public Service Commission, so that was about utilities and setting rates. And my conversations and my values throughout my life have dealt with everyday people and improving their lives. And, you know, and that's just what I grew up with. It's what my whole family, extended family, continues to do, what our conversations are about. So it's at the surface, always. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Vice Mayor?
I applaud that with you. I've always seen that that's very important to you, and but you know, one of the things that I failed to mention was economic development. I mean, that's a responsibility of local government as well, and we're going to get into more of that as the time goes on here. But you know, you're saying about the Imagine Clearwater and the performance pavilion. You know, I'm not going to disagree with you on that, but I think that that's part of economic development here. We're trying to spur something to really happen. And you know, if we do get this spur and this spark to actually happen here, Clearwater will, through taxes, will get more in their coffers to maybe help with programs like yours. So, you know, it takes it's not real easy. Like, you're just taking money. Mm-hmm. You earn it first, and then we can do some things with it. So,
but we have to have that philosophy that we want to do those things with it. And so, are we going to say we're only going to do those things if we have a bunch of money?
Well, again, I don't think the city is best able to handle that. You have organizations like HEP and a lot of nonprofits that they know what to do, and they know how to. You know, I was on the board of Senior Citizen Services, and we gave a lot of money to 501c3s that would help people like that. And as long as as long as the city can guide money flow from organizations like that and work together, I mean, I can see things being done for your ends as well.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Well, I look at it as, you know, what is the role of city government? Well, let me look at a bigger umbrella. The role of government has always been to provide the goods and services that the private sector doesn't want to do. Because there's no, if there was profit in what, you know, if there's profit in it, private enterprise will do it. But, so the government is looked at to provide the services that the private sector is not interested in, that are necessary. So, as was mentioned, you know, we have ours. The county is more responsible for social services. The state is even more responsible for that. The federal government handles roads and interstate, building highways and national defense and all that good stuff. But everybody has their lane, so to speak. Everybody's got the lane that they need to be responsible for. We know what our lane is. I would love for Denise and economic development and to be able to do more than they do. But we have a certain pot of money, or a certain amount of money that we do end up getting from the state and county for that kind of thing. And that's what we have. Now, if we want to make that number bigger, we've got to take that money out of our budget and out of our pot and decide, how much do we want to take out of that, and from what program do we want to take it from? We can't be everything for everybody, but we are kind of the clearinghouse, for the homeless in our community, for the people that need some help with housing. We're not the provider, but we are the clearinghouse. We know how to get them in touch with the county people and whatnot to see what can be available. Affordable housing is another thing. To build affordable housing, you've got to have a significant amount of government financing, government money, because a contractor, it still costs a certain amount of money to build it, and a private investor is not going to build it at what it costs to build and then rent at affordable housing rates, quote unquote, because it's not profitable. It's not a profitable enterprise. So we've got to be able to balance that. But we know what we're responsible for. We do a pretty good job with what we have to work with. We'd like to have more to work with, absolutely. But that's a change that has to be done at the state level. I would say, to do that, we need to make sure when you cast your vote in November, you're voting for someone that can get that done. And make sure that the people, make sure that our delegation hears us speak when we say, these are our priorities. Now, along the other side, the economic development side, you got to lead. I say you lead by example. That's why that's why we are doing Imagine Clearwater. We're putting our money where our mouth is. We are developing an identity and a destination and an amenity that will hopefully encourage the downtown property owners and to invest in their properties. That's what we're doing. We're trying. In my eyes, we're leading by example. We are putting our money where our mouth is, and we're willing to do Imagine Clearwater because the final product is going to be something that there will be something for everyone to enjoy. Some aspect of it. Some people won't be wild. If you don't have little kids, you're not going to be wild about the splash pad. If you've got little kids, you're not going to be able to keep them away from the splash pad. Things of that nature. But we're going to create a little something for everybody, and hopefully that energy transmits through downtown and throughout our city to spur reinvestment in the properties that need that reinvestment. So, again, I agree with the mayor. I want to stay in our lane, but I'd like for our lane to be a little wider. But there's only certain ways we can make that happen, and we'll continue to work towards that.
Councilmember Bunker.
Well, I agree with Kathleen on many things, but including this. I understand that we have certain day-to-day functions that the city provides. I do think it is important in a time of need, as we have with COVID here, to come up with some ways to help businesses stay alive. When COVID-19 hit, I was thinking, is there a nonprofit that could connect the restaurants who couldn't get customers with people who were hungry? And I couldn't find anything like that. But then we saw the newspaper article from some city, I think, up in the Northeast that was giving out food vouchers for the restaurants. And we went with that, which was a successful program, not just in feeding some people, not certainly the amount of people that we need to feed, as you know, the Salvation Army and so many other people have been doing successfully. But I think there is a role for us to take some action. I agree with Kathleen that $64 million for the park is a gamble. I knew there were 3 votes on it, and so I thought it's going to happen. I'll throw my support behind it and vote for it too, and try to make this a success. But I really do think there's no guarantee that it's going to be a success. There's no guarantee that those people who have left their buildings empty for decades are actually going to do anything with them to capitalize on this. Ultimately, in the long run, down the way, we'll have a beautiful waterfront, which in itself is an asset. But if this is going to drive a rebirth of the downtown, I'm not convinced yet. As far as, you know, the state has one of the worst safety nets in the country. It's just astonishing how we have purposely made it so difficult for people to get unemployment, for every aspect of it. So we do need to step up from time to help. And one thing we can do, you know, if we say, oh, you know, how can we get affordable housing? Well, I asked to be put on an agenda coming up that we talk about, you know, approving granny flats and garage apartments and you know, some smaller structures on that people can put attached to their home or in their backyard and rent those out so that they can get some rental income, and then the many people who need a place to live might have something affordable that they can pick up. That doesn't seem to me a difficult thing for us to do, and it's something I think we should leap on. Is it going to solve all the problems? No. But we've got a housing stock that's old, that's built for families of 5 or 6 people. And most homes across the country, you have 1 or 2 people living in them. So smaller homes, and perhaps smaller lot size, might be something we can adjust as well. But I think we do need to put as much care into thinking, what can we do to help people improve their lives, rather than just, well, here's a bucket of money, we can gamble on a park. You know, it seemed to be fairly easy to get that. Well, I mean, it was a fight for a few years, but that was kind of a no-brainer compared to, you know, helping the folks who are facing eviction. And again, is that the city's job? Well, apparently it isn't, but I think our citizens would view it as something we should be working on.
Well, I'm going to use it, I mean, some of the terminology that we're using, everybody's got different ones, but I don't look at Imagine Clearwater as a gamble. I look at it, the only way to make downtown successful is to put bodies in downtown. And Imagine Clearwater has a plan both with the band shell and with the amenities that the park's going to have the whole plan is designed to put bodies downtown. And when those bodies are downtown, they're right next door to, okay, I'm down here now, I'm hungry, I want something to eat. Boom, here you are. Got the businesses in downtown. So to me, I don't think it's a gamble, it's an investment. There's a difference. Now there's some gamble, some degree of risk in any investment. But I think the degree of risk in this investment is extremely low, and that's why I was comfortable in casting my vote the way it was. Because we've got to put people down here, without people, you've got nothing, and this is designed to bring people into downtown.
Well, I'd point out that the project's about 64 million. Each of the different components are about a third, a third, a third. So I'm curious, would you just scrap the entire 64 million? No, I have a feeling that 2/3 some of you would keep, and then another third would go away. And then the question is, if you move money, would it go into the areas that you are desiring, or would it just go back into our coffers, or would we even borrow it through a bond? So to say, I think this is one of the things that I think is interesting about the landings. People keep saying, save the green. I mean, I'm for jobs, and I know we've added 185 acres of green space over the last 20 years, but to say if you vote against the landings, it's going to stay green, that's a false argument. Because it's not, I'm speaking now. It's not necessarily what's going to occur. There is a very good chance that the golf course operator is not going to stay there. So what I'm pointing at is, just because you don't support one thing or another, don't believe that that money would either be diverted to something else, social services wise, or that anything's going to stay status quo. I think that's where we can really get off track and give citizens expectations that aren't realistic. Because my guess is that regardless, the landings, for instance, is not going to stay green space. And if we scrap parts of Imagine Clearwater, it's not a fact that that money would go elsewhere. And I think
you're not going to bond money to spend on social services.
Right.
Period. You're bonding
bond
money
for something
You're
for
bonding
capital.
money on capital improvements and physical things, not services.
Mr. Horn, do you have anything to add to this topic?
Mayor,
I think as administrator, it's,
I have lots to add, but this is an opportunity for me to listen, and so I really enjoyed most of that. I brought a copy of the charter with me. I looked over it last night, and and I'm sure you all are familiar with it, there's nowhere in the charter that gives us a mandate for social services. And I have always been sensitive to that, going back to when I was appointed, because the way we would pay for social services would be with general fund dollars. The way we would accumulate enough general fund dollars to cover whatever appetite we have would be a function of the millage rate. And so in 1998, when I first came to Clearwater, and then in 2000 when I became the manager, I had at least a couple of years to get a sense of the community. And one of the things, and I wrote this down, that really impressed me more than anything about Clearwater and elected officials who lead Clearwater is the fact that this community has a strong sense of accountability. And when council members say, when they campaign, no one wants to raise taxes, and that resonates within the community, then that communicates to me we have to be very careful about how we spend those general fund dollars. And so as a result, the only social service that I've ever emphasized, and at least 3 up here know that, is homelessness. That is the only social service where we have given general fund dollars, and it's in the form of grants to service providers. And that was because we were just having a heck of a time, and still have a heck of a time, dealing with chronic homeless who make personal decisions to live on the street, and the kinds of challenges and impacts that has on our community. So we do support in partnerships, where we aren't necessarily, giving money to help, providers. We are sensitive to the county. The county, has this huge social services budget that is supposed to cover us countywide. So that has served as a challenge to me in making sure that we maintain, a balance. That's number one. Number two, being a built-out community, and one of the reasons why in our economic development strategy plan, we try to identify opportunities where we can strengthen our economy. Because if we don't do that, the burden of providing services in this city falls squarely on the residents. And not all of our residents have the capacity to handle that additional burden. So that's why economic development initiatives that we identify that we believe will give us a return on that investment is really the direction that we as staff, have chosen to go. And quite frankly, that's why the landings has always been a part of that plan. That if we had to make decisions on how do we strengthen the economy, there is an area where clearly we felt we could make an investment. And I don't make any excuses about that. Never have. Because I've always felt that when I leave this place, I want to leave it better than I found it. And I want to make sure that the economy is better that can sustain us into the future. Now, these are very emotional things to me because I've always felt that part of my mission on earth is to make a difference wherever I live and wherever I am. And so that's kind of the mindset. So, Mayor, to your question, if we want to go in a different direction, moving closer toward, for example, social services, then I would need the policy guidance from the council to push me in that direction, because we all need to be accountable, and if citizens are behind us, that's great. If they're not behind us, someone needs to be accountable and to explain to them why we're moving in a direction that they don't want to go. Was that helpful? I don't know.
Yes. Ms. Aiken, do you have anything to add?
I do, just a little. And it's really to reflect on what I'm hearing from all of you, including Bill. And Bill, I thought that was great. And I thought you really capsulized a lot of what the council members were saying in a very concise way. But what I'm hearing is almost 3 different levels of response to the question about whether or not we provide social services. And the first level of response is very individual. It's a social worker teacher view, and that's not meant to be a negative at all, but it's a very individual response looking at individual needs of the individual people in our community. And then the second level response is more the governmental response. What can we do to make it better in the community generally, such as some regulations, allowing, making changes to regulations to allow for more affordable housing, etc. And then the third level response is our primary function, use of general fund dollars, support for the community generally. How do we make our community stronger to support the not-for-profits, to support the entire community altogether? And so this council is really reacting in 3 different ways to the same question. And Mayor, I think your question initially is, where should we be in our response level? Are we individual service provider, identify the person, or is that the function of the private non-for-profits? So really it's dividing up where we lie. So that was my comment, based on what I've heard from all of you.
Councilmember Beckman.
So I want to be crystal clear. I am not advocating for the city to be providing social services in any way. That's not our job. We're not going to set up a storefront, right, to provide services. I want us to partner. We already do partner some, with our social service deliverers in the community. I think we can do more. I think we can cut the red tape. We can do things with, zoning or permits, or there are ways to add value for those nonprofits that don't take out of our general fund monies. And I think if we can make that a priority, that's what I'm talking about, is to, we've got our strategic plan, and I think here is where we can put a little more emphasis on the quality of life of everyday residents. So partnering more is good. As far as the landings, I just want to be clear with some of the statements that have been made about it's not going to remain a golf course, because it's my understanding that it's up to residents to decide what's going to go on top of that land. If it's zoned for open space recreational, and we're in the process of changing that, but ultimately it's the residents who decide what kind of building or structure goes on that land, right? And so when somebody sits up here and says, well, it's not going to be a golf course, it's like, well, who are you to decide? Isn't it up to the residents to decide?
Actually, that's not completely true.
Okay, well, clarify for me.
I'll let Ms. Aiken, so you get it from her rather than from me.
Good.
The citizens don't vote on the land use and the zoning of that property. The citizens in this case are voting on whether or not we lease the property for a use other than its current use. So we could use that property for other open space recreation uses without a vote of the public. So it is not, it can be used for other open space rec purposes.
Such as, what might some of those be?
I don't have the code with me, and I'm not linked in at the moment, but there are a number of different uses associated with open space recreation. Mr. Delk, who's sitting out there, could probably name few quicker than I could.
Ball fields, soccer fields, host of recreational uses that are.
Okay.
Would be
Ball fields,
representative.
soccer
Tennis
fields,
courts?
tennis courts? Okay. Okay.
Ms.
Well-
Clayton, do you have any other?
Well, and like has been mentioned, everybody says, well, we could use more soccer fields. Well, are we the recreational facility provider for the North County and to some degree South Pasco County? Because if we are, let's build all these fields. But by God, South Pasco County, Tarpon Springs, Dunedin, the county itself, Safety Harbor, Largo, they're all going to start pitching in and giving us money to build and maintain these fields. And I can promise you, when you go to those entities and say, we need money for all this because your people are using them too, they're going to say, good luck. Money's not here. And I've made this comment to a number of people, to be honest with you, if the landings vote, if the no vote wins the referendum in November, it is what it is. But in my crystal ball, we see, I don't think it's going to stay a golf course because the Houston family is looking at, they're on the hook for a little less than $200,000 reclaimed water bill that they have not had to pay at this point because they haven't used reclaim, but now they have to hook up and go to reclaim and everything else. It's about $150,000 or a little over nut that they're looking at there. So I don't know that it's going to stay a golf course. I seriously doubt that it will. The expense to make it a park and then the expense to maintain it as a park, that comes strictly out of general fund revenue. The only way we're going to create that money in general fund is to raise the millage. But the most logical, to me, use of that land, if it's not going to be a golf course, is expansion of the air park itself. Build more hangars so we can get more airplanes in there, and the tenants in those hangars will pay the freight for what that land is, and for the maintenance and upkeep of it and everything else. So, you know, and that does not go to referendum either. That goes to the county for some changes, but it does not go to referendum. So, you know, if we want that land to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining as far from an economic standpoint, expansion of the air park is probably the most logical use for it in the future if this referendum fails.
Well, I don't want to make this a landings discussion because that's not what's on the agenda. I mean, I had heard that you had suggested Section 8 housing at a neighborhood meeting. Is that true?
No.
Okay.
And let me, if you want to end the conversation on the landings, I guess you can call it when you want, but the fact that you're stating that we added park space, when we talk about that acreage that's added or that's depicted on the great big map that Art Cater sent me that I'm utilizing, we've got Sandkey County Park is counted in acreage. We have Cooper's Bayou in different parts of our parkland or green space that aren't accessible to people. And when you get a good look of the map of our incorporated city and where green space is, it is sorely lacking in the middle of the city. And so, I'm not against development. I'm not against, light industrial. What I have a big problem with the landings is the city did not engage residents on the front end to talk about what do you envision here on this piece of property? What could we do with it? Can we have a little bit more balance with maybe some workforce housing, park area, and some lighter development, not 7 or 8 hangars of light industrial stuff. But the other thing is that people drive around our community all the time and see underutilized or vacant buildings that they wonder, why isn't there a factory or a light industrial there? And I get, it's not rocket science that the developer wants a wide swath of property to come in and develop on, rather than negotiating with every tenant or every owner of a piece of, patchwork of property around the city. But I think we have an opportunity to say, so what? I will work with you. I will work with some incentives, whatever we have to do to get those already vacant areas developed, because I value this swath of green space here. I'm not going to give this up so easily because it's easier for you, developer, to develop it and maximize your profit. And that's kind of the view I've taken. I don't know if it's perceived as a threat when people say, well, if we don't vote for the landings, we're just going to have a great big airport there. That's not what residents want that live around there. They're already dealing with a whole bunch of noise and an increased in flight traffic. I just think we can, when we drive around and see vacant areas that very well might already be zoned light industrial up around Hercules and Keene, whether they're in an incorporated Clearwater or not, those need to be utilized first. But and discussions about herbicides and pesticides and the cost to maintain a park, I'm sure there are ways to design a recreational area that is much more organic and natural and would not take extensive, maintenance. But that's not my expertise.
Well, again, I don't want to make this a landings
No.
discussion. The 185 acres has been added is a fact. So it's undeniable. I hoped you'd gone out and seen KPOC and some of the other
I've been at KPOC. It's
properties
very nice.
that we did buy over the last 20 years. And the second thing that I, opened the door, we talk about affordable housing. The best way to make housing affordable is get people jobs so that they can afford the housing.
Yeah.
And the reality is there's no other place in the city that will create a critical mass of jobs the way this site will. So you can't say on one hand, I want affordable housing and jobs, and then not look at this as a catalyst for that very thing. And I think we also have to look down the road beyond COVID. One of the things people always criticize government about and for is not looking down the road and being farsighted and making strategic decisions and plans. And that's exactly what this is. And you also have to consider whether the air park got expanded or not. This is not a place that you want to encourage a lot of birds and other things to be in, because bird strikes are a legitimate concern. And I can tell you that the neighborhoods that surround the air park are going to be a lot more upset if they have airplanes that are crashing. And we have had that in the past. Now, several of you weren't here back then, but many people want us to close the air park altogether. There's a lot of strings attached to that, but all right, let's move on. How do we want to encourage diversity on boards, employment, and generally in community as a whole? I mean, I think it's incumbent upon us for our boards to be out there going to people and suggesting that they sign up to be on the boards. And do it with a, with an eye to getting diversity, gender, race, experiences, age, geographic areas. I think all of those are important. And really recruiting of boards is pretty much our responsibility as we're out and about in the community.
Well,
very hard right now with COVID-19.
I don't disagree on it, but I think, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, because that's not what I'm saying, because it's not what I'm trying to say, but, given backgrounds and experience, you can have 5 white men, 5 black men, 5 that look physically the same, but it can still be a very diverse body from their outlook and their inputs because of their personal experiences and backgrounds. So diversity is more than just skin color and sex to me. So, but I think we want to look for diversity, because the more varied opinions you get, the better decisions and better direction you get. You're headed.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, to me, diversity is age diversity, gender diversity, diversity of abilities, ethnic diversity, and social diversity. And it's good to put it out there. Diversity is a good thing, but if it comes down to diversity and the best person for the job, I'm always going to lean for the best person on the job. I'll take everything and assess it, but the council we kind of got scolded a few years ago when we had an opening on council, and we had I think it was a diverse group of people that we could have chose from, and we decided that we thought the most person that had the experience and without training somebody with all the issues, and then we got some backlash for it because we ended up having 5 old white guys on the council, so we never kind of heard the end of that. But I think if you put it out there to groups, you're not going to have, unless you put it out and say, we're really searching for diversity in the groups, you're not going to have a lot of interest in that. So I think it's mostly the advertising in the groups and the committees to say, hey, we're looking to really fill this with a rounded, group of people, and encourage questions, value diversity, and then see who's going to apply.
Councilmember Bunker?
It's tricky because there are some people who hear diversity and immediately are set off. I agree that recruiting is probably a good way to go. We had a young guy come in and pitch all of us on some exercise equipment for the park. And I talked to him for quite a bit, and I suggested he consider running for office at some point. And he is running for the Downtown Development Board right now. So I'm happy to see that. We do have to reach out and convince people that it's a good idea to run and talk about what you're passionate about. As far as, you know, I don't think we're going to have any quotas or anything like that. I don't think that's in the cards. Certainly can't for an election. But I think generally it's a terrific idea to have a great mixture of people on all the boards.
Councilmember Beckman.
Well, it's no secret that I value diversity. And I think one goal might be to have diverse representation comparable to our population. So, you know, our African American community and our Hispanic community at like 10, 11%, 14% or so, that might be an aspirational goal for different boards or, you know, contracts, things like that we can look at. We can look at awarding, if we award a big contract like to Stantec, maybe we could ask for a certain percentage of the subcontractors to be minority-owned businesses. Something like that might work. But I think as far as you're talking about reaching out to boards and encouraging people, I think we can make it a more welcoming place for people who are different than us. You know, we could hold meetings at different times. We could hold meetings in different locations. We could have people participate remotely. You know, we could, I have developed alternative methods for engagement. We need to maintain a presence in all neighborhoods in our community. And we need to partner with diverse organizations and agencies and invite them, you know, extend a full invitation to come and present. Tell me about your nonprofit or your organization. It needs to be intentional. It needs to be an intentional reach out and a shared goal if it's going to, you know, if we're really going to get some momentum behind it. But it's tough, you know, it's tough. People, I'm retired. I'm very fortunate to have retired at 52, you know. You all have, you're retired, David, right? And so, you know, we have the luxury of being able to attend meetings at 9 a.m. I set meetings all week. Anytime people want to meet, I can meet. So I have that luxury. But, you know, somebody who's younger, somebody who has children, somebody who's working, you know, caring for elderly parents, whatever you've got going on in your life, it's harder to dedicate to this kind of work. And it's for like minimal pay. You know, they can't live off of this salary. So it's, you know, they either have to be retired or have another job. And that's the fact. And that limits our pool. And you have to be able to attend meetings at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday or one Monday or whatever, and 6 o'clock. You're fighting our traffic around here. It's you know. So anyway, I think maybe we'll offer childcare during city council meetings so that more people can attend and get involved. So I think we have to be creative. But I know there are legal parameters. I'm not looking for any kind of quota, but I think we could set goals and be creative in encouraging diverse representation and celebrating it.
Well, I'm all for us getting more diversity. And I want to clarify all this so we at least can move on from the conversation a little bit. In some ways you said you don't want quotas, but you also mentioned our percentages
Goals.
of minority populations. I think our Hispanic population's almost 20%. Last time I looked, I think our black population's about 7. Does that sound right, Bill?
I think it's a little higher than that,
I thought it was about 10
Is
for
it
black.
11?
and about
16.
18 for Hispanic, somewhere.
But would you want to be prescriptive? That's really what I want to try to figure out.
I don't think prescriptive, but I think aware, and we have that up there as, hey, this is our percentage of our population in Clearwater, and this is the percentage that we have on our, in our city government, in our offices, in our leadership, whatever, and how can we work to bring those closer together?
Okay. Good. Let's move on to number 5. What should city's role be in economic development? Does it contribute to live, work, play? How can we partner with other government entities in the private sector? Do you believe in incentives? To what extent? And this question was actually after number 6 before, but it's been changed. So that's why it says, to what extent, again, ROIs. Councilmember Beckman,
Yeah,
then the Vice Mayor.
So when I think about this economic development, so there's this little remainder point I have about, about the landings and jobs, tying in with allowing people to have an income to afford homes. And I think about Imagine Clearwater and the jobs that that's supposed to bring. And to me, it seems like they're service jobs, they're minimum wage jobs, they're hotel work, restaurant work. And if we're going to say that's an economic driver, where are all those service workers going to live? Because they're not going to be able to afford to live in our community, and we don't have enough homes for them. So if that's an economic driver, who's it an economic driver for? And yeah, I think our responsibility is to try to increase, businesses to come to our community and be very welcome to them. We have a lot of amenities to offer businesses, and I would be open to incentives, but, and I know there's some discussion about average salaries and what an average salary means and all that. So I don't want to go down that road, but I'm just saying, be great to have tech come into our city, some higher paying research jobs, things like that. I don't have any expertise in knowing how to attract all that, but I think when I think of Imagine Clearwater and a booming downtown, and we talk about restaurants and nightlife, and I love all that, the people that work there, other than the owners, aren't raking in a bunch of money.
Vice Mayor.
Okay, so I have kind of a 10,000-foot view of this. Imagine Clearwater's, it's not the people that are going to work in the park that are going to be the economic development. The economic development is going to be that we will bring people down, we'll bring feet on the street, we'll bring people down through our downtown. It'll make the downtown more of a vibrant place, which in turn makes the restaurants and the merchants downtown have more business. When they have more business, it becomes more valuable. The property becomes more valuable. The taxes come in for the city coffers that way. And when you have an urban area like our downtown that has a very dense core of businesses and people, the better you can get that to be vibrant, the more tax base that will generate in a smaller area. If we could get the downtown really hopping, that will do a big, that'll really become an economic driver for the city, for the entire city, because the money that we'll get in for taxes on the properties and the developments that go in there, right now we have to pay people to come downtown. We have to give them incentives to come down because it's risky. The market has told us that over and over for years. And that's why we have economic help and support for people to come down. You want to come down and have a restaurant, we'll help you with that to offset the risk. The return on investment that we get is hopefully they'll be successful. And the more success generates more success. You know, you've heard about if you could get an anchor down here, other businesses will come in and then it will take off. And a lot of people don't understand the economic theory behind that, but that's what it is. You know, it's not just one or two businesses, not a couple of restaurants. It's not, oh, gee, we got one more, clothing store downtown. It's the fusion of everything happening down there and it just really taking off, and that's what benefits the city. That's what brings the biggest secret I've said for 10 years, we have a thriving IT market downtown. I mean, and these guys aren't making service money. They're making six-figure, and we've got lots of them, and that's what sets Clearwater apart from Dunedin, who's got a very successful merchant base. And everybody says, gee, I'd go to Dunedin, they got a great downtown. Well, what about our IT market? When we get past COVID here and these people are back downtown in their offices working, and then they take breaks for lunch and they come down for dinner, it's going to really drive the value of those properties up. And more, the market sees this and they say, hey, we want to be there now. And you don't have to pay them to come down anymore. So that's what we see is going to happen with the vision of Imagine Clearwater and putting those amenities in the park that'll pull everybody around. And I think it's really going to be great for our people in Clearwater, no matter if they live in Countryside or South or North Clearwater. They're going to come down because they're going to want to see this. They're going to want to come down. They're going to want to spend some money downtown. And it's also going to bring money outside of Clearwater down, which is important. You want to have the flow of money in Clearwater, but you also want to have the new money. That's why the beach took off, and it's such a good thing because we bring outside money into Clearwater. And by that, yes, the people that are servicing the hotels, they're getting not so good a service, they're getting a service wage, but because people are coming down and they're staying on the beach in the hotels and bringing that money down, we can do other things for our population here in Clearwater, like sports. I mean, and we'll get into that later, I'm sure we'll be talking about
I don't know that we're going to get that far, so we all need to be efficient with
it
our
all
words.
ties together, everything ties together, and that's why economic development is so important.
Okay, but I want everybody to kind of think about, where does economic development fit into our live, work, play? Are we willing to have incentives, or do you just want to have a laissez-faire economic system?
Okay, let me be clear.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay. In areas that you need to have the incentives, I think you need to have support for those in our downtown that is depressed, and you want to bring people in and get that spark going. You're not doing it because you're just trying to help them out. You're doing it because you're offsetting the risk. And I'm for that. I mean, I've seen it work over the years. Now, we haven't taken off yet, but I know it's going to happen.
Well, I've made the example before, and I think economic development's an unbelievably important function. How much incentives am I willing to give? Well, you got to tell me where the money is and how much it is and where it's coming from. But I mean, I don't know how many of y'all have ever been to Atlanta, Georgia, but they built a place called Atlantic Station in just north of the Georgia Tech campus, but it's in the old Atlantic Railroad yard, Atlantic Steel yard, and they basically created its own little downtown, but it's got some anchor stores, but it's everything on the ground floor is restaurant, retail. There's a Dillard's department store at one place, but then there's the second and third floor in most of the buildings are office. And then the third floor up, and most of them are 6, 7 stories. Third floor up or fourth floor up are residential apartments, some condos, some rental units. And it's really a mixed use, live, work, play area. And you can't get in it anymore. I mean, it is fully occupied. It is doing extremely well. And I look at that, and whenever I'm in Atlanta and I go there, I look at that and I say, this is what our downtown could be. But what it takes, and again, as I've said it before, it takes the individual property owners to be willing to invest in their property. And in some cases, that means scrape clean what you've got and build new. But if you're willing to make that investment, I can promise you the return on that investment is there. But I'm willing to help incentivize, to a degree, some of that investment, but, because sometimes you have to incentivize the first couple, and then people say, hey, wow, then it rolls. So, first guy to the table gets the best deal, and that's true in a lot of cases, but I mean, I think that's what our downtown needs. We need more housing, we need more office space. Well, you can build a mixed one building that provides all of those things, but the individual property owners have to see the value in that, and I think that's what our economic development department is working very hard to try to create. But
Councilmember Bunker?
Well, yeah, we need to be involved with economic development because, as you mentioned earlier, that's where we get the profits to actually put to all of our other, needs here in the city. So I'm not against incentives. They have to make sense. And as far as partnering with the government entities and the private sector, I don't have a lot of experience in this. I'm learning as we go along.
Well, we do have a county economic development department, and Denise works with them on certain things. I mean, we only have certain areas where we can really give direct money, really downtown, and the CRA is one of them. Outside the CRA, we tend to give incentives through greater density, intensity, and land use type things in certain zones, like on the US 19 corridor. I look at catalytic projects. Beach Walk was a catalytic project. It was, at the time, fairly substantial. It was expensive. It certainly displaced businesses for a while and displaced about 650 parking spaces that people had become accustomed to literally parking right there next to the sand and going out. And so there was a significant gnashing of teeth when we did that project. Some people hated it, but I believe that it's proven that it was a great catalyst to bring in new caliber hotels that we had not had previously, has created a wonderful public space, is pictured not only by us, the city, but by another number of other organizations and tourist magazines and everything else. And I think other cities have come to emulate it because they've seen what a success it was. So I believe in catalytic projects. That's where I think the city should be investing. Sometimes the ROIs on those are hard to calculate. It is using your best judgment. I believe incentives in some instances. I like to measure outcomes when possible. And I think we ought to be partnering with private sector and other government entities. Denise, do you have anything to add? Because if we haven't answered questions for you, I'd like you to pose questions that you don't think we've given some guidance on for staff or Mr. Horn.
I'll let Denise, I'll have a couple things.
I think this is a really interesting discussion. Thank you. Denise Anderson, Economic Development and Housing. So there's a couple of different ways to look at economic development, and I've heard both. There's the Main Street Economic Development, which we're most familiar with here as it relates to our CRA. And we've got a funding mechanism in the CRA to be able to affect some of those outcomes or make those investments that hopefully lead to additional investment. I prescribe to, and my role is generally centered around economic-based theory. So economic-based theory has also been described here where it's the net inflow of money, tourism is an example. It's the net inflow of money versus the leakage of money going out. So through transactions of manufacturing is a classic example. Through the transaction of manufacturing, you're selling your goods or services out, that's money coming in. It generates additional spend through supply chain, disposable income, things of that nature. Manufacturing, IT, software, finance, and insurance are again, great examples. And those are the reasons why we pursue those kinds of industries, because of the multiplier effect that that has. But that's the economic base theory. It typically brings with it those higher paying, higher skilled jobs or career laddering opportunities versus the Main Street business. So Main Street gets to the vitality of a community. It generates, it's about place. It's about creating interest, can be catalytic, as you suggested. My focus is always the second floor on up. What's putting people in those offices? What kinds of jobs are they doing? And we partner with the CRA to help hopefully be a vibrant ground floor destination, because all of that will drive that together. So I just kind of wanted to set, I guess my question is, when you think of economic development, are you centered around Main Street and what that looks like? Because I've heard a lot about downtown. Or are you talking about the second floor on up economic-based theory that I've described? And it could be a mixture of both. I just would like to know, when you talk about economic development, what do you mean? Because we can have very different definitions.
I think we focus a lot on the Main Street. I think we need to focus on the latter more than we do. We do play really well in Clearwater. We don't do the work as well, I think, as some of our neighbors. And that's one of the things I want to rectify. Because, if you talk about even environmentalism, it's a lot better if people can drive a mile or 2 miles to work rather than 20 miles.
Or bike or walk, right?
Or bike or walk. So I think that's an area that we have somewhat struggled, and I think it needs to be emphasized. I think the 19 quarter somewhat addresses that, but anytime you make a change like that, there's a period of break-in. People aren't aware of what it is. They may have to see an example of one successful project to then be enticed to follow along. And I think those that come to the table first generally should get more of an incentive, and as time goes by, maybe the incentive goes away altogether because you've proven that other businesses, other entities can make it. But
So if I may add, because you've sparked a thought.
I opened the door for you. Walk through.
So when we think of US 19, in my mind, that's the greatest economic opportunity that the city of Clearwater has in terms of quality job creation, dynamic, interesting environments. It could be sort of another new downtown, if you will. But when we're talking about attracting businesses to the area, and most of our work is really, we have a business retention and expansion program helping to make sure that those economic base theory businesses are comfortable and happy here and have the resources that they need. But we also have a pretty good and now growing attracting element to our work. And we know that CEOs are looking for a few different things. One, sustainability is really important to them because it's important to their employees. I think that's something that needs to be talked about in the future. How do we incorporate that into economic development? But secondly, it's about place. And yes, Main Street, yes. But think of it in these terms, 5 to 55 or 30 to fly. And that's when companies are looking to locate in an area, what is access to them? Is it 5 minutes to a 55-mile-an-hour route? And US 19 will become that, has become that in large part. And 30 to fly. US 19 is proximate to both airports, 30 to fly. Those are huge attractors for us if we can capitalize on those. And when we talk about incentives, It used to be you pay for jobs, right? Everybody knew, you pay for performance, you pay for jobs. And to some extent, a few years ago, the state legislature did a C-turn on that and said, wait, it's about an infrastructure investment because then you hold on to that benefit. I happen to prescribe to that. I think it's a much smarter play. I don't like paying for jobs. First of all, it's difficult to track on our side of the house, but investing in those things that stay with the asset, regardless of what happens with that job creator over time, I think those are really smart moves, in my opinion. So if we're going to get into some level of discussion about incentives, I would love it to be built around that, because that's something I can work with and I can compete with.
Any questions for Ms. Sanderson? Councilmember Beckman?
Are you concerned at all when you talk about the mixed-use buildings and we have retail or restaurant on the ground level and then maybe some offices and then maybe housing on the top? Are you concerned post-COVID with offices and the need for office buildings and people actually working from a central location?
Certainly there's been a ton of discussion about that, and I'm not sure anybody really knows what's going to go on. At first, in the first few months, everybody said there's never going to be anybody coming back to office, and then we were seeing some interesting things occurring there. Certainly people can relocate, and I was just on a webinar the other day with ULI, and Pasco County is seeing a huge influx of people from the Northeast who still work in the Northeast but are buying $800,000 homes. Thankfully, my husband gets to build those, so that's good. But when you talk about office and demand for office, we're also seeing some interesting return. People are craving each other again. So I'm not sure where it's going to land, to be honest with you. I think it'll be, give us a year. People have short-term memories quite often, and so there may be this renewed interest in office. I'm not sure. I don't have a crystal ball.
It's interesting. We have an office that is 2 floors. The 10th floor is all working from home. The 11th floor is all working in the office. And it's strange how it's broken out that way. But those of us on 11 think it's a lot more productive to be in the office. And our employees are expected to be there. And then the philosophy downstairs is completely different. I think we're finding we're much more social animals. And I think we miss being with people. I've also started to talk to some people that said it drove them crazy to work from home because they never got away from it. And that's what I subscribe to. I go to my office, I do what I need to do, and when I'm done, I close the door and leave it behind. But it'll be an interesting experiment to see how we come out. Mr. Horn?
Mayor, Council, Pam and I have had a partnership almost the whole time that I've been the manager. Pam has been here before me. So the two of us have really tried to give Michael, Gina, Denise, Amanda, a level of freedom to be as innovative as they possibly could be. But Pam and I are your gatekeepers. Why are we your gatekeepers? Because we never want to bring you a project, certainly one that has incentives, where your response would be to us, what are you thinking? And that's because the risk profile of our council, historically has been rather conservative. Although there has been conversation indicating we're willing to take some risk, when we actually have brought a project to present to you, sometimes, and I'm not talking about you, I'm just saying over my 20 years, sometimes we have gotten just the opposite response. I mean, I think we believe that we're in a place and time where everybody is expecting us to be creative, and we want to be that innovative. And so what's helpful to me is at least to hear you at least articulate at some level where you fit in that risk profile realm. Are you willing to take some risks that historically you probably would not have been interested in doing? You've kind of demonstrated that a little bit already, but I think since we're talking about, partnering with the private sector, and all of you are familiar with how the private sector wants government to take increasing levels of risk as opposed to them, and so we're in this dilemma. Do we take more risk with the idea in mind that ROI is going to be out there somewhere?
I've always been willing to take measured risks. We talked about Beach Walk. I'm going to talk about another one. And we've also talked about Imagine today. St. Petersburg does the pier for $92 million and no one says anything about that price tag. All they do is talk about how great it is, how much it just makes St. Pete that much greater than it already is. I am economically conservative, but I also believe in investment. Because if you don't invest, you're falling behind. I look at the Capitol Theater. We bought that in '08. One of the worst potential times to do anything. By the way, that's when most shrewd investment people buy things, is when everybody else is hurting. And we bought it for cheap because it was in receivership. And now it's become a catalyst for downtown. It's the second most successful theater of its size in the United States. But I remember people at the time, some said we were crazy, some said it was inappropriate. I ask people to look down the road 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now and see what our investments are going to produce for making Clearwater a great place to live, work, play. And so, if the circumstance is right, I'm willing to take some risk and to make an investment. We can't do it on a daily basis. We don't have the resources. You pick your shots. I think had the aquarium gone in the City Hall location, it would have been the best thing that could have ever happened to Clearwater. Not just downtown, all of Clearwater. But it didn't work out because the time to raise the money was not long enough. That's a shame. The aquarium's done it on Island Estates, which probably isn't the most appropriate location. So, other comments on that, and then we're going to take a break.
I understand that you're economically conservative. I'm economically cautious as well. I mean, I know about investment. We've, managed our money well, and I understand you buy low in '08. But I also, especially spending, it isn't just my personal income. These are millions and millions of dollars, the city and the residents' money. I also believe in the value of experts. And so when we have extensive studies and experts come back with recommendations, I feel that we need to really give those needed weight and respect. So that's, and I believe in looking down the road. And, when you've talked about the Capitol Theater or that, some said it was crazy or inappropriate, were those paid experts that said it was crazy or inappropriate, or just residents or different people in the community?
Different people had different views.
Yeah.
Some people thought it was wonderful, some people thought it was foolhardy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is why we have representative democracy. At some point, we have to make decisions. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they're educated, with a lot of backup and thought, but you're still making a decision. And, Jack Welch, who used to be the CEO of GE when it was kind of in its heyday, used to always question his managers. If you aren't failing occasionally, and in government we really err on the side of not failing. But if you aren't failing occasionally, you're not taking enough chances which result in good things. I don't know that we can be that cavalier in the public sector, but I do understand there's risk, and we hope for good reward. Any other comments on this? We'll take a quick, can we do it in 5? Let's do 7 minutes. We'll be back at quarter after. Okay? All right, we will reconvene the work session. We are on item 7. The beach is our largest economic engine. How do we make certain that we preserve the quality of the beach? Under that is cleanliness, infrastructure, safety / police presence, businesses that undermine family-friendly environment.
I'll take the first
Go
shot.
ahead, you jump on that
I'll take the
beach.
first shot on this one. Bottom line, I think you've hit the 4 spots. I mean, those are the things we need to focus on. As long as it's a clean destination, the infrastructure is sufficient to supply the needs of everything out there. And we want our residents and our visitors to feel safe. And we can have discussions at a later date about, businesses that, quote, undermine family-friendly environment. We don't want to be known, we don't want Clearwater Beach, I don't think we want Clearwater Beach to be known as Party Central. Although, given what happened over the last weekend, I think a lot of places who are known as Party Central aren't going to get it because a lot of colleges are deciding not to do spring breaks this year. So that's gonna redefine a lot of stuff. But I think these are the important. I think those are the important bullet points to keep Clearwater Beach what it is and what it can be. And the second question is, did we do number 6?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
I jumped it.
Okay. I was just.
We'll go back to
Wasn't
it.
sure. We'll go back to that.
I started crossing things off. Thank you. We'll still finish this as long as
Yeah.
we've started. Vice Mayor, you want to go?
Yeah, I thought that what you brought to council about a month ago with your pictures of Beach Walk and some of the wear and tear it's getting, we need to do a better job of that and make sure that we keep things up. The cleanliness has always kind of been a problem. I think we do a good job on the beach itself with the raking and keeping things up, especially during red tide. I think everybody pitched in and we did a real good job of trying to harvest the fish before they even came in to the beach, which is real important because our economy is based on tourism, and we want to do the best we can to keep our beaches clean. I'm looking forward to see those underground trash receptacles being put in because I think that'll help, especially when we get a lot of people out. They seem to really get the trash cans full quickly. This will make it where they don't, they stores under the ground.
more
They can pick it
capacity.
up. Yeah, the capacity is bigger, so that's a good thing. I think we do a pretty good job on that. But we do have some concerns on some of the businesses on the family. I think Clearwater has always been a family beach. I think we need to maintain that and just keep, alert to businesses that don't agree with that.
Councilmember Beckman?
Well, I love our beach. I think it's lovely, but in speaking with business owners and residents, especially down on North Beach, there certainly has been an issue with litter and cleanliness. One of the ways I was thinking, and I was talking to one of the homeowners just last night, but that ties in with family friendly as well as cleanliness and litter, is if we had a campaign where kids designed do not litter signs or something, and they design a prototype and then we could have it manufactured and have them done in something that's sturdy, but something that's got an emotional component, like we live here, I live here, please keep my home clean, or something like that would maybe hit people emotionally. And then the other thing about the beach is thinking forward-thinking, realizing that sustainability and the environment are big concerns for people who come here. You know, what if we pursued having our beach be the first who's certified ocean-friendly or something like that? That really draws national attention to our beach. It protects what we value most, our whole economic driver there. And I think that would be a great opportunity to do good, to bring attention, and it would also, you know, I don't know, spring breakish kids who are just there to party and drink might not be as drawn as much to, you know, we're the green beach, we're the sustainable beach, the family-friendly beach. So those are just some ideas I had about the beach. But consistent complaints about trash, and it's not, it's just, you know, it's there.
Well, all 4 points are important, and I don't know what more needs to be said about that. We should be considering much of this throughout the entire city, but, you know, especially the beach.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it was I do think that there are neighborhoods that get tired of hearing about the beach. I mean, I hear that pretty frequently. And so one of the ways that you deal with that is we need to talk about why the beach is important. And I think the last time I checked, and I haven't checked it recently, but back in the day, Clearwater Beach, Sand Key represented about 40% of our tax base, which is enormous. And I think citizens need to understand that the hotels and restaurants out there, they're not homestead exempted. Those property values go up with whatever the market goes up. And so they are paying a lot of the freight, which is healthy in many ways for our citizens because they're not paying for it, the beach is paying for it. But what I want to make certain of is that, you know, a couple things, that we don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. So you need to keep the quality high. And I think we need to make certain that people feel that they're safe. And that means a police presence that is obvious and that certain behaviors just won't be tolerated. And we have had issues on occasion. I think we have dealt with them well so that people know that there are behaviors that are unacceptable. Fortunately, we don't have liquor on the beach, but we still have to enforce that. I am disappointed by trash that I see, and it's not, you know, it's people, it's obviously some of our residents potentially, but it's also visitors, and I think we need to do a better job, and I would welcome something along the lines of, you know, from the residents of Clearwater, we're happy you're here. We hope you'll treat our beach the way you would treat your home, or something along those lines. I want people to take ownership. It'll make it easier on our staff, but it'll also create a much better environment. I was out there last week to speak to a business owner, and there was a lot of trash in front of one of the businesses that is not yet opened. And it would normally be their responsibility to take care of that, but it was unsightly. It doesn't create the atmosphere that I want. And I also just want to make sure that we are willing to reinvest, you know, for instance, on Beach Walk and invest in it so that we keep it at a very high level. Because it's magnificent, but we really need to, you know, keep it that way. Once you start to defer maintenance, you can get behind the 8 ball, and then it becomes really expensive. Mr. Horn, you want to add some things?
Yes, Mayor. I think we have to and will turn the corner on cleanliness. We will turn the corner on infrastructure. That's going to cost more money. So we'll highlight where that's going to occur. And if you don't want us to spend the money to do that, then you can certainly say, don't do it. Lastly, business that undermine family-friendly environment. I believe we should reclaim that title. I think we ought to reevaluate when alcohol is allowed sales to continue. It's 3 a.m. I think we ought to pull it back to 1 a.m. This is just the manager's perspective. So I don't want people listening to this to think that any one of the council members necessarily supports that. And I am sensitive to the impact on business. I mean, so this sentiment is not designed to create hysteria. It's designed to give us a talking point about how do we reclaim the brand that we have come to love so much, because the clientele has also changed a little bit. We have more of a drive-in clientele than tourists from outside of Florida, outside the country. And there is a different feel. And as the mayor pointed out, there are some businesses that are being knuckleheads, quite frankly. I'm just using that phraseology that we're not happy with. So, Mayor, that's all I wanted to share.
Anyone want to comment on that? I have asked the manager to have an item on the agenda about parking, because I don't know how much the citizens realize where a lot of the services on the beach come from. And it is the parking fund that supports keeping the beach clean and raking and other things. And so I think they think that it's just a revenue generator, and it is, but it goes to very specific things about maintaining the quality and having lifeguards and things along those lines. So, Councilmember Hamilton.
Well, I think, addressing addressing what the city manager said about closing times for the bars, you make decisions. I know my family, for example, we make a conscious decision we close at 11 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays. That's our decision. We could be open later, but we want our employees to be able to get out at a somewhat reasonable hour. Number one. Number two, the inherent problems that come with 11 to 1 o'clock in a business that serves alcohol are not problems we want to deal with. So we close. Now, then there's businesses that stay open from 1 to 3, and the inherent problems from 1 to 3 are, I don't want to over-exaggerate it, but it's technically exponentially more than closing at 1. So and that just causes problems for the police and anybody around them. So, if we are going to be a family friendly, if that's what we want our reputation to remain, we've got to be cognizant of that, and we've got to be willing to address it. But like I said, we could make more money. My brothers and I, we could make more money if we wanted to stay open till 1 o'clock, given our location and the number of people that enjoy our restaurant. But we make we make the choice to close because we don't want to deal with the problems that come along with all that. Not that everybody is a problem, but the ones that are problems are problems. And we don't want to deal with it. So, something we'll have to discuss. But I can understand why it's coming forward.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I think this year has been different than any year. I mean, we're going through a big change with COVID, and I mean the emergency order and restaurants 50%, then 100%, and then bars not open, then bars open. We're not in a normal situation. So I know we're having problems, and I know that the clientele, as the city manager said, is changing. I really don't want that. I would not support that. Clearwater's always been a family beach, family location, so I think I would probably support a cutback on the bar hours. My dad used to say nothing ever good happened after midnight anyway, but I'm not saying we cut it back to midnight, but I think right now we could cut it back to keep some of the issues that are happening, and then we could take a look at it when things get back to normal and see what we really want to do. But definitely in the vein of keeping Clearwater Beach a family-friendly community. And also, you know, the bartenders and the service personnel that work till 3 in the morning, a lot of them live on Clearwater Beach or renting out there. And they go home, they don't go right to bed. So they're getting home at 3, and they might stay up another hour and party a little bit before they go to bed, and it just disturbs the residents. So I think that that's something that could probably come back to us we can consider, you know, when things get back to normal.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll go back to 6. Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Just wrap me upside the head when I miss something.
I can't.
I know.
We got this right here.
So what is your philosophy on projects that we expect a positive ROI or return on investment? How long should payback take? Are there types of projects that you are willing to forego ROI? What role should Greenprint play in projects? What would justify long payouts or no payouts? You want to go? Go ahead.
Yeah. I've had this discussion with Assistant City Manager Delk regarding, take for instance a library. Any public facilities, when we put money into them, we really don't expect an ROI on a public facility, but I certainly want to make sure it's in the benefit of the residents of Clearwater, and how much of a benefit and for how long. But to go further down the list here, you got, let me just read the list. You got how long should, what is your philosophy on projects we expect a positive ROI, and how long should payback take? I think that we should keep the payback to a, if we're doing some kind of incentive, that it should be something in the period of 5 years. And and mostly what I was talking about before too, when we were talking about, I was thinking more of the CRA kind of incentives, not the city incentives. And I'm glad somebody brought up the US 19 corridor, because that's really our economic, that will really bring in a good economic value to our community. But the role of Greenprint and what should that play in projects? I think that every project should have, be guided by Greenprint. Not necessarily for a, you know, a certified program, but we should strive to make sure that everything has some kind of a value that that we're putting on it as far as keeping it green. I was a contractor for a long time, and I know that we started getting into, whenever we did remodeling or construction projects, we wanted to make sure that we incorporated green into it. Didn't have to be a certified platinum or gold, but we strive to the best we can, you know, so we get a return later in years that would pay for itself. What would justify a long payback or no payback? I think I think everything has a payback that we're going to invest in. I mean, if it's a, like Beach Walk, you're saying, you're not going to get a payback exactly with the money you put in Beach Walk, but you do get it in the long run with the amount of development that comes in that is attracted by it. So, you know, I think if we're giving something and we're contributing something to a project, that there should be, we're giving something to get some kind of a payback, whether it's in return in money directly from that project, or it's something in return that will benefit the community.
Let me put a little context into this, because I kind of go back to when we started to think about Greenprint, and also when we were going through the 08-09 recession. And we were looking at all of our buildings and trying to figure out ways to reduce costs. And so we had consultants come in and they looked at all the buildings, from putting motion detectors in so that we weren't lighting rooms that didn't have occupants, to controlling the thermostats because some people want it really cold, and so in the middle of summer they were turning it down to 72. And we looked at replacing windows in certain areas, and we looked at weatherizing places if we had leaky buildings. Could we put more insulation into some buildings? There were just a myriad of things that we were looking at. But what we had to determine was how many years was it going to be for us to recoup the investment that we were going to make? Because you were putting new switches and thermostats and all sorts of things. And we kind of determined, I think it was about 6 years, was kind of the payback that we wanted to see. Some things might have taken 10, 12, 15 years. Some things only took 2 or 3 years. But we finally determined 6 years, I believe, was our number. Am I right? 5 or 6?
Somewhere, yeah.
It was in the ballpark.
In the ballpark.
And that's kind of how we decided on what we were going to do. And that's kind of where this question is leading. Is there a specific time frame that you want your return? Or are there projects that you're buying into a philosophy that this is good for our community, and so we're going to do it regardless of whether it takes 20 years or 30 years, or you never get a full return on your money. We're going to do it because that's important to us. That's kind of what I'm getting at with this question.
Well, I guess I'll try and take a shot at this. So get comfortable in your seats. Imagine Clearwater is an investment that will have an effect and impact on generations. So to me, the ROI, I'm not looking at recouping our $60 million in 2 years or anything of that nature, but it's there. What role should Greenprint play in projects? I think it should play a role in every project, but I don't know that we can make sure, not every project's going to meet Greenprint to the letter. And we should be able, and I'm sure we will be able to quantify and qualify why it does not in certain areas. I don't know that I can answer this question without answering question number 13 as well, which is the Phillies. The Phillies, we're looking at, the original number was $80 million. That number's probably going to come down. I would be surprised if it doesn't in the overall number. Now, the city's portion of it was 20, I believe. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million was our portion of the 80.
16?
16.
Yeah, I thought it was 16, but
The capital
It's
fee,
close.
16. Well, what I'm saying is, using the county's own numbers, the county says the Phillies have an economic impact in our city of $60 million annually. We use the multiplier, which I think is more realistic, and it's closer to $100 million annual impact, because the visitor from the Delaware Valley, Philly fan, is here spending money in their hotel rooms or their apartments and wherever, in their lodging, and then they go out to dinner. They're spending money in the restaurant. They're tipping the server and the bartenders. Those people in turn take that money and spend it on their needs and everything else. So that money goes. Now, without the Phillies, none of that money exists. None of that annual expense exists. So you're looking at, they're asking us, and I'm using the $80 million number in total to, just for a big picture, $80 million investment for a 20-year guarantee that the Phillies are going to be here for 20 more years at $60 million a year impact. Well, 60, using the county's number again, not our 100, but the county's, 60 million for 20 years is $1.2 billion. In our economy, which we benefit from. Without the Phillies, we don't have that. Bringing it back into a more understandable number, I apply it to my family in the Palm Pavilion. But if you tell me I need to invest $80 million or $80,000 in the Palm Pavilion, but you're going to guarantee me $1.2 million in return over the next 20 years, and those are very conservative numbers, it wouldn't take my brothers and I 30 seconds to cut that check. Because that is the Phillies, I know people are out there, oh, it's just millionaires, why are we putting all this money? I'm not worried about the Phillies players and the owners. Yes, they are very wealthy. I'm not looking at that aspect of it. I'm looking at it at the amount of money their industry and their business puts into our economy. I have no control how much the Phillies pay their employees. I have that's not our, because none of our money goes to pay those employees. So, but our investment is to keep that annual economic engine here in Clearwater. So the return on that, while it doesn't cover it in the first year, but our annual, the economic impact, this is something that gives an automatic instant return. So, I like that kind of return. But I do, I look at every project as how long does what is the projected return and how long is it going to take, over how many years and things of that nature. But like I said, when the Phillies, the ROI there is almost immediate. So,
Councilmember Bunker.
Well, I don't know what the magic equation is for, what's the proper number of years we should expect, but I do think we should update our green print plan and put that into action in pretty much everything that's constructed. I think that is going to save money all the way down the lane. So that's a worthwhile investment. As far as foregoing return on investment, well, we have things like our libraries where we don't expect a financial return, but it enhances the entire city. I'm sure there are projects like that.
Tangibles versus intangibles that are
Right.
hard to measure.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Councilmember Beckman?
I would echo that when we talk about return on investment, there are things other than just financial returns. There's quality of life return and things like that. So, but generally, I'm sure we talk about financial returns on investment. So we had green print that, you talked about the 08-09 recession. You were looking at buildings and how to save money. And I would certainly advocate for updating green print and adhering, setting measurable goals and adhering to green print. And I think these actions need to be taken now, whether we see any type of return on investment. It might be for your grandchildren's future. And the fact that climate change is real, global warming is real. We have maps that will show that part of Clearwater will be underwater. These are facts, scientific facts that I think we need to operate under. It might not be part of Clearwater Beach might not be underwater during our lifetime, but it certainly is projected to be under our grandchildren's lifetime. And so when we make investments in green print recommendations now, it is for future generations, and so I certainly advocate for that. And I buy into a philosophy of science and expert opinions. And so when we talk about return on investment with Imagine Clearwater or whatever else, I put weight in experts that guide us on how big should it be, what's the economic driver, all that business. So, That's important to me. And then, I know we have the Phillies later, and I understand a historical perspective with the Phillies and tradition, and that's all great. But I've also done some research, and it is a little bit difficult to quantify the exact economic impact that they make because of where we are. I mean, we live in the most beautiful place in Pinellas County, and during spring break, would people be filling those hotel rooms and those restaurants if the Phillies were here or not? I mean, I think they probably would. We have a whole lot to offer, whether you're a baseball fan or not. And so to separate that, I don't know how accurately we can do that. I'm absolutely an advocate for keeping them here and working with them and working through negotiations, but to say that they bring in, $80 million, they're looking at $80 million, they'll have a $60 million impact annually. I don't know if just having them here brings $60 million, that if it were just our great weather and, and a downtown that's developing now, and we've got restaurants and live music and things like that, that people are going to come here. So does that offer enough on return on investment, tangible versus intangible? I am for incentives. I don't know if I have a finite line, like I think we need to have 5-year return on investments or something like that. I think it depends on the project. I don't know enough to speak about parameters of what's reasonable, If we're talking about energy and solar and clean energy investments, those returns on investments are consistently coming down, and it's shortening, and so, that's good. I think I'm done for right
Okay.
now.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Horn, anything you want to add?
No?
Yeah, I just want to narrow things so that we do have some parameters, because I think it's easier on staff to use a filter to understand projects that they may want to bring to us versus ones that they wouldn't, because they fall way outside the parameters of what we think is realistic. That's why I think putting numbers on things helps. That does not mean that, if something marvelous came along that may not meet our criteria, that staff wouldn't make a judgment call and say, it doesn't meet our criteria that you've set forth, but we think we should bring it to you anyway, so that at least you can use your judgment to make a call, yes or no. And also, if we have a philosophy where there are certain things that ROI doesn't matter, I kind of want to know that. I mean, for the record, I believe in global warming, and I've always believed that we ought to take care of our environment. Nobody fought harder against the potential of offshore drilling back around 2010, because the beaches are one of our greatest economic engines, and to potentially follow that with oil is foolishness. At the same time, I don't think Clearwater can solve global warming itself. It has to be done on a much larger scale. And so I'm unwilling to spend unlimited money towards things when other areas are not spending money. So that's kind of my philosophy. I want to be careful about the way we do it and understand that there is an ROI on things. And we try to capture the low-hanging fruit. Another thing we did back in, 08, 09 was we converted most of the fleet, which were diesel trucks. And, I know not everyone loves natural gas, but it was a much cleaner alternative than diesel. And that's when we made the investment in the compressed natural gas plant, because we thought that was going to be a benefit. And I think it is, but it's degrees. So, all right. Yes.
So I just want to have a better understanding. So the phrase that Clearwater can't solve global warming itself and not wanting to spend money unless other areas are spending or other communities. I mean, can you explain that? I mean, what does that mean? Do we need a full United States commitment? Do we need commitments from cities in the county? I mean,
What I'm saying is, I am unwilling to do everything environmentally at any cost. Okay? So for instance, and we might as well have a conversation like this. I don't believe in putting solar panels on every building. Okay?
I don't know there.
Well, but I mean, we brought up the bathrooms at the marina recently. Yeah, I said before, when we were going to redo the roof at Ruth Eckerd Hall, we approached Duke. Actually, I asked us to approach Duke and see if they would put solar panels on the roof. Because it is an enormous roof out there. And they declined because they said it was not large enough to get the right ROI. So when Mr. Baker came to us and asked if we wanted to buy into that solar project, which would be done in a rural area in a solar field, what it comes down to is there's economies of scale there. And so I would rather be involved in something like that where we're getting economies of scale that do an offset for the city of Clearwater rather than doing one-offs on different buildings. I mean, I asked Miss Aiken, we used to own some land over in Hillsborough County that was for a sludge farm, and it was an enormous piece of property. It has since been sold, but you know, I would rather go out and do a solar farm on a piece of property like that, where you really are getting economies of scale, specifically, and do an offset for the city, rather than, and what I want is an expert to come in and tell us a little bit more about, is it more efficient to do it in one big area versus doing it on all these individual buildings?
That's fair, but I would say too that there is a return on investment when you do it on little buildings. So when people go down to the Seminole Boat Ramp and see solar on the bathroom, they're like, oh wow, the city's, you know, moving forward, they've got solar, they're saving me tax money because my money is paying to light that bathroom or whatever. I think anytime you have an opportunity to, if the building is in the right position for solar and you can reduce your electric consumption and therefore your carbon emissions, let's do it. If it's a 3-year ROI on those little solar panels on the bathrooms, why wouldn't I want to save money? If I've got a little bit of money now to put up front to put on that bathroom, yeah, it's a no-brainer.
I don't think it's a 3-year ROI though. If you could show me it's a 3-year ROI, I'm in.
Well, what is the number though? Is it 5? Is it 7?
I'm more apt to go for 5 to 7. If it's 20,
Yeah, it's not going to be 20.
well, that's not what I'm hearing from some people.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about experts. I want to also talk a little bit more about what goes into the panels and then what happens to them once they're discarded. Because my understanding is there's rare earth and there's other issues. See, I think it's easy to throw out stats that are very enticing, but I want to go a little bit deeper than just a stat. And just as we were talking about natural gas at the end of the council meeting the other day, you know, it's fun to put on the front of your license plate that this is a zero emission car. And again, I'm not talking to you, but other people who have electricity in their house that is being powered by Duke and say my car is zero emission. That's ignorance is what that is, because it isn't zero emission. There is a power plant that is burning natural gas. The electricity is put through the lines. There's loss of electricity, and then your car gets powered. But it was really powered by natural gas.
But Duke is transitioning to solar. I mean, they're building solar fields.
Some.
They see the future.
And we're investing in that.
Yeah, and that's a great thing. But I mean,
So-
that's what the future is. And so, well, you know, you need to be early adopters to give confidence to other investors to move it forward, you know.
That is an intangible investment. That's not a tangible return. I mean, when you say, so people can see we have solar panels on the bathroom and that gives them confidence,
Yeah,
that's not necessarily a tangible return to the
correct,
city.
right.
So,
But it can be a return on investment. I mean, other people can go out and lower consumption, and then our air quality is better, you know, our environment improves. There are all sorts of, you know, consequences of people seeing the future and what's coming. That's
Did you
kind of
wanna
how.
add
Well,
to this
I
now?
think, global warming, sea level rise, these are all things we need to pay attention to, no doubt. But but even if we, and I'm not talking Clearwater, I'm not talking Florida, I'm not talking if the United States, address this to the nth degree, if the rest of the world isn't buying into the program, how much progress are we making? A lot of the global warming issues and sea level rise, you look at India, you look at China, they're polluting our waters and doing things to a much higher degree than what we are. The United States has been somewhat, at least, aware of it. We may not taking all the steps that everybody wants them to take, but we've been aware of it for a much longer time and made some effort. So, I mean, this is something that, and I think I understand what the mayor's saying when he says, Clearwater's not going to solve this problem. And I don't disagree with that. But it is, we have to be cognizant of it. We can do what we can do the things we can do to address it, but the problem is much larger than Clearwater. So, we just,
So I just wanted to make a little footnote to this bathroom thing. But before you guys,
not bathroom humor, please.
well,
yeah.
well,
Let's not
before you
go-
guys were on council, the bathroom came to us at the old council, and it was like $1.5 million for a bathroom, and we're like, no, we're not going to pay that. So we had them go back to the drawing board to reduce the cost of it. So I'm sure, I mean, it didn't reduce it by much, but we still had to put.
Well, that was still, that's government regulation that costs
I
us so
know,
much.
I know.
But that's because it's so close to water.
Well,
Yeah,
but
that's
I
right.
mean,
That's
but
right.
I mean, a bathroom at water level, to me, it's a bathroom. If a storm's gonna ruin it, I'd rather rebuild it, but instead we gotta elevate it and we gotta make it ADA accessible, so you either gotta put an elevator or some sort of mechanism to get you could build it at grade, everybody'd have access to it, and I can promise you, if a storm knocks it out, it's cheaper to, you could replace it 3 times for what all the ADA, what all the regulations add to the initial cost. So,
But isn't that to protect our water as much, right?
to a degree, I mean, we're to some degree.
But if we get to that point, I mean, if we have a storm of that magnitude,
We got a
2 of
lot
our
bigger
plants
problems.
are underwater.
A
So,
lot bigger problem.
I mean, there's going to be things that we can't avoid. It's one of those common sense things that just doesn't seem to permeate necessarily up to the federal level, but. All right, anything else on this? We are at noon. We slated for 3 hours. Would you like to continue on,
I would.
or do you just want to schedule another?
No, I'd like to
Session.
schedule another session.
We're not going to get through this. I've got a 1 o'clock doctor's appointment, so I can go until about 1:45. It's up to y'all.
I say we schedule.
Let's go to 1:45, and we'll schedule another meeting to finish the rest.
Is that what you all want to do?
I mean, I'm okay till 1:45.
We're about halfway through.
That's fine.
I have a 1 o'clock phone call. I'd say, can we just end here and set
Okay.
another 3-hour one?
We can do that.
Okay, you good with that?
Yeah.
We can kick off the next segment with your favorite topic.
What is it? Oh, yeah.
Mark's like, no, one more.
I'll be fresh. You're real fresh and ready to go.
Yes, Mr. Horn.
So how soon do you want to schedule that next meeting,
Let's
next workshop?
give it a week or two. Let's get through next week and let's schedule another one on our off week
Okay.
and finish this. I think we
2
ought to
weeks from,
finish it.
2 weeks from today?
Rose, you got it? Good.
Ms. Aiken,
Are there any of the topics that you have already discussed that you want to either have more discussion on or more information from staff or a presentation or any experts in the area? Is there anything that more that you need or that you want to elaborate on? It didn't sound to me like there was.
I mean, we've already gone, I don't think we've finished the Phillies discussion, but we've at least touched upon it. I mean, I think some of the topics are very difficult. You know, what are the appropriate levels of service? You know, when you get to those, it may not be terrible to have the directors for those departments here to talk a little bit about how they determine, you know, I mean, like our fire departments, we've determined how many we need. And it's really, it's radius more than anything. And then staffing and meeting, you know, IOC levels, which were, I think, in the top 1%. So, but it would probably help. I mean, we had poor Gina here all day and didn't even get to any of her topics, but I'm glad Denise was here. I understand that whenever all of our staff is here, they're not doing what they're tasked with, but I think it would be worthwhile to have some of those Slaughter, Ellers, and the rest be here. Okay.
What about, you know, could we have a presentation about an inventory of our underutilized or vacant spaces in our city buildings, and what are the carrot and stick options for getting development into those already paved over spaces? I mean, how realistic is it to get a better understanding of the quantity and what our options are for getting life into those areas?
So you're talking beyond downtown or just downtown?
Beyond the whole incorporated Clearwater.
I mean, that's a Herculean
That's a
undertaking.
major study.
Well, are you talking about city-owned properties or all properties?
All
She's talking
properties.
about all.
Yeah, that's a major study.
We do have, you had asked for us to bring back some information to you from CRA that addresses the legal issues, and we will have that at the next CRA meeting.
Okay.
But that does not address the vacancy issue, and I don't think you guys are going to be thrilled with how little tools you have to force people to use their property, which is what I hear you saying.
Or encourage, not force, right?
Well, there is a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the topics on just private property rights, which I think is something that a lot of people, you know, don't completely understand. That's one of our future topics in here.
And so I think the list of publicly owned is probably pretty small, right, and easily accessible, the ones at the city-owned property, correct? So we have that, that's easy.
City Hall's probably the only thing we're not utilizing
Yeah.
right now that,
Yeah, it's a very short list.
yeah.
You're looking for surplus city-owned properties?
Yep, no, not city, well, yeah, I mean, that's easy enough, yeah. But an inventory of surplus, underutilized, you know, not utilized, already vacant business, you know, storefronts.
I think we want to have the conversation first about what's in your toolbox
Yeah, yeah,
before you consider what it would cost to look at the entire city and what is vacant and underutilized. Because you're talking about enormous, it's not something our staff could probably do. You're
Yeah.
talking about probably a couple $100,000 to do that study.
Yep.
And it's a moving target. Denise, you
Right.
want to come up to the mic if you would?
There's also a difference between underutilized and vacant.
right.
And if you're using zoning as your standard for underutilized, there's really a big difference.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that right now with COVID, the tail on this, I think we're gonna be seeing for a long time. And so trying to get a hold of that number right now it may serve no value because it's rapidly changing, for sure, unfortunately.
But does the fact that, but does the fact that it's a Herculean effort and a couple $100,000 big, long study indicate that there are probably quite a few areas, right? I mean,
You're talking private when you.
yep, private,
suggest that.
in incorporated Clearwater or whatever. I mean, I just think about me driving around and checking different, it's like, wow, that one looks vacant, and,
Sure, with the predictions of 1 out of 6 commercial retail enterprises potentially going under, boy, to try to do a study of that right now and,
I know you can't. I know, I'm not.
trying to imagine what that would be like,
Yeah.
and I can't imagine that would
Yeah, yeah.
be easy,
Okay,
or within a reasonable time frame.
but we will have a presentation about what's in our toolbox in order to get more business and life and energy, right, to try to
If that's what
incentivize.
y'all are agreeing to for the next time, we could probably get that,
Well,
and others.
I think what they're asking is what we had already said we would be presenting
Yeah.
at the CRA meeting, the next CRA meeting, and it's a legal analysis of what we can do. It's not a economic development analysis. That would be different.
Do you have anything to add, Gina? Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, I think this was a good session. I hope everybody got something out of it. I hope staff got something out of it. So, we'll reconvene in a couple weeks, and we'll see you all on Monday,
Sounds good.
if not sooner. We're adjourned.